Ugh, this one still makes my blood boil. It's been a few years now, but the taste of sweet, sweet revenge, it just lingers. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? That feeling of being wronged, taken advantage of, and then finally, getting to even the score. This story is about all of that. And believe me, it's a good one. You're gonna want to stick around for this. But first, smash that like button and subscribe if you're into stories of justice. Now, let's get into it. It all started with Mark. He wasn't just a coworker, he was someone I thought I could trust. We worked together at a small marketing firm, a place that felt more like a family than a workplace, at least on the surface. We'd share lunches in the break room, the air thick with the smell of microwaved leftovers and lukewarm coffee. We'd chat about the latest office gossip, the weekend plans, life's little annoyances. I saw him as a friend, someone I could genuinely connect with. That was, until I found out he was having an affair. No big deal, right? Wrong. Because the woman he was involved with wasn't just some random stranger. It was Sarah, someone I knew, albeit on the periphery. We went to the same yoga class every Tuesday and Thursday evening. We'd exchange polite nods and smiles at the grocery store, the occasional small talk about kale and the price of organic avocado. Seeing them together, though, was like a punch to the gut. The casual way they interacted, their hands brushing, the lingering glances, the secret smirks, it was all a massive betrayal. Not just of his wife, but of me too. It was a violation of the unspoken rules of decency, of the casual trust I'd placed in him. The initial shock quickly morphed into a simmer of resentment. I felt used, somehow. Like I'd been unwittingly cast in a play where I was supposed to be the supporting actor, oblivious to the real drama unfolding offstage. Mark was always a bit of a show-off. He was the type who thrived on attention, who needed to be the center of every conversation. He'd brag about his investments, throwing around financial jargon like he was Warren Buffett, even though I knew he was making a modest salary. His fancy car? A leased BMW, of course. His successful lifestyle? All meticulously crafted to create an illusion of wealth and power. He'd talk about his summer home, about the exotic trips he took with his wife. I'd listen, nodding along, but a tiny voice in the back of my head was always whispering, something's not right. He was also, I learned later, a liar. A complete and utter charlatan. He wasn't nearly as rich as he pretended to be. In fact, he was up to his eyeballs in debt. He'd conveniently leave out those pesky details when he gave his "Mark is a financial whiz" speeches to anyone who'd listen. He seemed to enjoy lording his fabricated success over everyone. He'd also made it abundantly clear to everyone at the office that he considered himself a player, a man who could have any woman he wanted. Charming, right? And the thing is, everyone seemed to believe him. He was magnetic in a gross, slimy way. He had this air of confidence, of invincibility. He'd look at you with those piercing blue eyes, and he'd make you feel like you were the only person in the room. It was all a carefully constructed facade. Then came the photos. One afternoon, the office was quieter than usual. Most of the team were out on client calls. I was idly scrolling through my work phone. Just mindlessly flipping through emails and social media. Suddenly, a new message popped up in my inbox. It was from an unfamiliar number. I was about to dismiss it as spam when I noticed a familiar name attached, Sarah. My heart skipped a beat. What could she possibly want? I'd never exchanged numbers with her, even though we knew each other from yoga class. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the message, then I decided to open it. The message contained photos, and they were, well, they were of Mark. doing things with her in his apartment. I stared at the screen, completely frozen. The air seemed to thicken around me. My gut churned. It was a mixture of disgust, disbelief, and a sick kind of morbid curiosity. Here was concrete proof of the affair. The affair I'd already suspected, now laid bare in a series of intimate photographs. And it was being delivered directly to me. Why? Why would Sarah send these to me? What was her angle? The photos themselves were a brutal assault on my senses. They were intimate, revealing, and unflinchingly raw. The details were sharp and clear, the colors vibrant. I saw Mark's apartment. The expensive furniture, the modern art, the carefully curated decor. A glimpse into the world he was trying so desperately to project. But it wasn't a pretty picture. It was tainted. I messaged Sarah back, my fingers trembling as I typed. "What is this?" I managed to write. It took a few moments to hit send. I wasn't even sure I wanted to know the answer. She responded almost immediately. "He's a liar. And a user. He owes me a lot of money." The words were blunt, direct, and laced with bitterness. Apparently, Mark had convinced Sarah to invest in a sure thing, some high-risk tech startup he claimed to be funding. He'd spun a web of lies, promising huge returns, painting a picture of financial security that she couldn't resist. She'd handed him a significant chunk of cash, expecting a huge return. Of course, there was no startup. Just Mark and his lies. And now, she wanted her money back. Through me. She wanted me to somehow make Mark pay. At first, I was hesitant. Involved in other people's messes is never a good idea. You always end up getting burned. I considered deleting the messages, wiping my hands of the whole situation. It was none of my business, right? I could just pretend I never saw any of this. But as I learned more about the situation, the more my anger grew. Not just at Mark, but at the blatant disrespect, the manipulation, the arrogance. It was like he was a predator, preying on anyone who crossed his path. He didn't care about the consequences of his actions. Sarah had even sent me screenshots of their text messages, which were filled with Mark's empty promises and manipulative excuses. He'd strung her along, taken her money, and then, when she'd finally confronted him, he'd tried to gaslight her, making her feel like she was the problem. "You misunderstood me," he'd write. Or, "I'm so busy with work, I can't get back to you right away. Just trust me." The excuses were endless. The slimy bastard. I started to think, really think. I'd seen him flaunt his wealth for years, and yet, he was using the company credit card to buy flowers for his wife. He'd take clients out for ridiculously expensive dinners, and I'd be the one stuck having to pick up the slack with boring budget reports. I'd known something was off, but I'd never realized the extent of his deceit. The more I learned about this man, the more I disliked him. And the more I wanted to level the playing field. Then, the final insult. Sarah was right. Mark was broke, or as good as. He'd been bragging about a big promotion coming up, the culmination of all his hard work and dedication. But according to the company's grapevine, it wasn't happening. In fact, he was on thin ice with the boss for his consistent poor performance. He'd been losing clients, missing deadlines, and his overall performance was slipping. I saw this as my chance to act. He deserved a lesson. And I was going to be the one to teach him. I felt this surge of adrenaline course through my veins. A strange mix of fear and excitement. I knew I was walking a dangerous line. This was going to take meticulous planning, a lot of hard work, and potentially, a lot of risk. But I was ready. The urge for revenge was too strong to ignore. I spent the next few days quietly putting together a plan. It wasn't going to be violent or illegal, nothing like that. I wasn't going to physically harm him or commit any acts of vandalism. It was going to be creatively inconvenient. Just enough to expose his lies and his true nature. To bring his carefully constructed world crashing down around him. I realized that Mark had a serious weakness, his ego. He craved attention, admiration, and the appearance of success. He was addicted to the validation he received from others. And that's where I was going to get him. First, I needed a little help. I messaged a friend of mine, Liam, and gave him the full rundown. He was a genius with tech. A true whiz kid. And he would become my partner in crime. He was also a brilliant hacker, the kind of person who could navigate the digital world with ease. We met at a dingy little coffee shop, the air thick with the aroma of burnt coffee and stale pastries. I laid out my plan, the pieces of my puzzle. Liam listened intently, his eyes narrowed, occasionally nodding. "So, you want to expose him?" he finally asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Exactly," I replied, feeling a surge of confidence. "He needs to be taken down a peg or two. And I think I know how to do it." My initial plan involved stealing from Mark. Petty, maybe, but it seemed fitting, somehow. A little bit of payback for the way he'd treated Sarah and, by extension, me. But stealing isn't in my nature. It wasn't who I was. I'd always played by the rules, worked hard, and strived to do the right thing. Committing a crime, even a minor one, would be a step too far. Luckily, I didn't have to. Instead, I decided to use the information I had access to, the details from Sarah, the things I'd picked up at work, and create a perfect storm of humiliation. I wanted to expose him for who he really was, a fraud, a liar, and a manipulator. The final nail in the coffin? His big important dinner. It was a Friday night. Mark, as always, was trying to impress a potential client, who also happened to be a major investor, WN in the business for demanding people with real clout. This dinner was his make or break moment. The client, a Mr. Harding, was legendary. If he landed this client, it was rumored that his promotion might actually happen. It was the golden ticket. The pinnacle of his carefully constructed facade. If he didn't, well, I had a feeling I would be seeing him go. I knew I could take control. I could unravel his carefully constructed world with a single email. And that's exactly what I intended to do. My first step was to ensure I had access to Mark's financial information. I wanted to see the truth, the real details behind the lies. With Liam's help, we created a fake website, using a domain name that vaguely resembled the company's. It was a convincing facade, mimicking the look and feel of the real site. I had him set it up so that Mark's laptop, his personal phone, even his office computer would log in automatically. Liam, with his expert skills, was able to create a phishing scheme. Anytime Mark accessed anything on the internet using company equipment, he was directed to the fake website, completely unknowingly. It was a digital ghost in the machine, gathering information without anyone knowing. We got everything we needed. Every transaction, every credit card statement, every email, everything. His entire digital life was now at our fingertips. The next part of my plan was to orchestrate a public reveal. I needed to create an environment where Mark would be exposed, not just to the client but to everyone he knew. I wanted to ensure maximum humiliation, maximum impact. The perfect opportunity presented itself at the dinner he'd been bragging about. That was going to be the moment. I had to make sure everyone witnessed his downfall. I spent a week gathering information, meticulously crafting my strategy. I knew what I needed to expose: the affair, the financial lies, and his general incompetence. I wanted to show him for the fraud he truly was. I cross-referenced his financial records with Sarah's claims. I documented every lie, every inconsistency, every shady deal. I spent hours digging through his emails, his text messages, his social media. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. I drafted the perfect email, a comprehensive summary of Mark's deceit, detailing every aspect of his lies. The day of the dinner arrived. It was a Friday. The anticipation had been building all week, a slow burn of nervous energy. I got ready as if for a night out, but I was filled with anticipation. I wasn't going there as a guest, of course. I would be at my own apartment with Liam, monitoring the situation. We had the client's phone number. We had the waiter's number. We had everything. I'd contacted the waiter at the restaurant, telling him I was the client's personal assistant. We'd paid him a significant sum to follow my instructions. He was going to be our eyes and ears, the silent observer in the midst of the storm. He'd feed us live updates from the dinner, providing us with the information we needed to orchestrate our grand finale. I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. What if something went wrong? What if we were caught? The potential consequences loomed in my mind. But the thought of Mark, finally getting his comeuppance, overshadowed any lingering doubts. We started small. I sent anonymous messages to Mark's wife via her social media. I was careful to use a burner account, ensuring my anonymity. I started with an anonymous email containing a few of the more suggestive photos. I knew that would get her attention. Of course, the details were missing, but I still wanted to get her attention, and it worked. I could only imagine her confusion, her shock, her pain. She was getting her own little taste of revenge. The waiter texted us that Mark was holding court, regaling the client with tales of his brilliance and success. He was in his element, spewing his usual lies, trying to project an image of power and wealth. Then came the appetizer course, and with it, the main course of my plan. I texted the waiter again. Now, I typed. My heart was hammering against my ribs. And then, I started. I had spent days collecting data and writing a detailed email to the client, explaining every single lie and shady deal Mark was involved in. I had included everything. His affair with Sarah, the financial woes, the lies about his promotions. I even included screenshots of his emails and text messages, proving his deception. To support my claims, I also attached photos, screenshots, and financial documents. My heart was racing as I sent the email. It felt like the longest few seconds of my life. In mere moments, I had sent the email, and sent copies to his wife, the firm's CEO, and the entire office. The waiter texted, "It's going down, boss." I took a deep breath, and waited. The silence was deafening. The waiter's subsequent texts were a play-by-play of Mark's humiliation. Client's face just dropped. "D," he texted. "Wife is screaming. People are looking around, confused. Mark is sweating buckets." I could almost feel the heat rising off him, the beads of sweat forming on his brow. Liam and I were practically bouncing off the walls, a mix of exhilaration and nervous energy. "This is actually working," Liam exclaimed, grinning from ear to ear. The waiter then sent me a photo. It was Mark. His face was an ashen mask of shock and horror. His mouth was open, and his eyes were darting around the room, desperately trying to understand what was happening. He looked like a cornered animal. His wife, who had marched up to him, looked like she was ready to physically attack him. Her face was contorted in rage. The client, who'd been staring blankly at his phone, now looked disgusted. I could almost hear the internal monologue of Mr. Harding, the man who'd built his reputation on spotting and leveraging successful business. I imagined the disappointment, the feeling of being duped. My phone beeped again. It was another text from the waiter. He's trying to deny everything. Says it's all a misunderstanding. Wife just slapped him. The image of the slap brought a rush of satisfaction. A physical manifestation of the betrayal, the hurt, the anger he had caused. Liam and I high-fived, our laughter echoing in the apartment. The revenge was playing out perfectly. It was a scene straight out of a movie. As the night drew to a close, I checked my email. A response from the CEO. "Thank you," the subject line read. It went on to say that Mark had been asked to resign, and an investigation was underway. I almost didn't believe it. It was over. The culmination of all our planning, all our effort, all the pent-up anger, it was done. Over the next few weeks, the details trickled out. Mark was fired. His wife left him. He lost his apartment, his car, and the image he'd so carefully constructed over the years. He vanished, without a trace. His world imploded, exactly as I had hoped. Sarah, I should add, got her money back. And I got something much better. I got satisfaction. Justice, even. The sweet, sweet taste of revenge. I wouldn't say I'm proud of everything I did. I knew I was close to crossing the line, but I also knew I was doing it to right a wrong, and, in my opinion, necessary. I'm not proud of how I manipulated the situation, or how far I had to go to achieve this. But the feeling of justice, of finally seeing someone like Mark get his comeuppance, it's a powerful drug. And I will never regret doing it. It was a harsh lesson. I learned a lot about people, and about myself. I learned that revenge is a dish best served cold, and that sometimes, the best way to deal with a liar is to expose him. The best part? I was offered Mark's job. I got the promotion he had been desperately chasing, the one he thought he deserved. I now have the power, the recognition. And I did it by playing his own game. The irony wasn't lost on me. So, what's the takeaway from this, besides the obvious, don't mess with the people you work with? For me, it's a reminder that bad behavior has consequences. That arrogance and deceit can only take you so far. And that sometimes, the quiet ones are the ones you should be most worried about. I've told this story to a few people, and they were all amazed. So, I figured I should tell it to you guys too. And to anyone who's ever been wronged and felt powerless, know this: sometimes, justice isn't just about the law or the authorities. It's about taking matters into your own hands. And that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Have you ever gotten revenge on someone? Tell me about it. I want to hear your stories. Be sure to like and subscribe if you liked it, and also let me know if you want to hear more stories like this. Thanks for listening. Until next time.